The U.S. is on track to fully end military operations in Afghanistan by the end of August. The Pentagon says that the withdrawal is more than 90% complete. But 20 years after U.S. forces came to Afghanistan, they are leaving behind a country on the verge of an all-out civil war. Charlie D'Agata reports from Kabul, Afghanistan.
While President Biden says the Afghan military has the capacity to stop the Taliban onslaught, the reality on the ground, they're taking a beating on the battlefield. From mid-April, when President Biden made the announcement U.S. forces would be pulling out, the Taliban have taken territory at lightning speed, seizing a third of the country's 421 districts and fighting for control of many others. As the militant group inches ever closer to the capital, Kabul itself, the president has pledged that hundreds of American troops will remain in the country to protect the U.S. Embassy and Kabul's international airport. And while he said a Taliban takeover is not inevitable, the people of Afghanistan fear that without the presence of U.S. troops, the country will collapse. Especially vulnerable women, a whole generation who have never known the oppression of the Taliban, fear a return to strict Islamic law will bring an end to their education, their jobs, and their future. A senior Afghan government official told us that he agreed with President Biden that the Afghan military does have the capability, the will, and the courage to stand against the Taliban. He said the group may be gaining territory, but it's losing support of the people. Lana?
Charlie, thank you. For more, I want to bring in Ryan Heath. He is a senior editor and author of Global Translations newsletter for Politico. Ryan, let's go ahead and just jump right into the central question. Do the Afghan National Security Forces have the capacity to stop the Taliban once U.S. forces are out of the country?
President Biden isn't wrong to say that it's possible, but it is far from a certain bet. He cited today the example of the Afghani forces outnumbering the Taliban, something like 4-1, around about 300,000 to 75,000. But we know from 9/11, we know from the Taliban's past success and its current encroaching success in taking control of these districts, that it's not just a numbers game. If it was just a numbers game, they wouldn't have control of all of those districts. They wouldn't have been able to enable so much terrorism in the past. So I think that it's extremely optimistic on the administration's part to think that this is all just going to end well. There are a huge number of risks in the months ahead.
It has never really just been a numbers game over in Afghanistan. Ryan, how can the U.S. assist the Afghan government and its people as they try to resist Taliban takeover post-withdrawal?
Well, that's the $64 million question. Or if we look at how much has been spent over the past 20 years, it's the $2 trillion question. I think what really would need to happen to provide some form of assurance is you've got to keep those 650 security staff there who are designed to support the embassy, but who could support the Afghanis in other situations. There are really going to need to be strong agreements for use of bases, to provide monitoring and other support from neighboring countries, for example. And really, they're going to have to do a lot of political support. This is where the legwork of diplomacy comes in as well. This hasn't been a very stable or successful Afghani government. And, there are very clear domestic political reasons why Biden might want to get out now and to do it as quickly as he has done it. But this is a big burden to put on a government that hasn't really been able to stand on its own 2 feet in the past.
Ryan, there are many players in the region. I was thinking about the conversation that I had with Ouija about President Biden articulating that the mission in Afghanistan was really to root out Osama bin Laden. But we've heard so many administrations over the 20 years say that part of the mission and the essential core of the mission is the stability of the region, the global fight against terrorism. So what does this withdrawal mean, not just for Afghanistan, but for those larger goals for the entire area there?
Yeah, it's essentially a bet that says that terrorism isn't the main game in town anymore, that it's a geopolitical rivalry with China that the U.S. is most worried about, that it might be other forms of warfare, whether that is cyber attacks, bio warfare, and so on, that the US government and its allies are more worried about. But this is very much a US-led initiative. There were a lot of countries that you might say were only in Afghanistan in the first place out of solidarity with the US, or because the US requested that they be involved, and you had this huge NATO presence and more than 30 governments and armed forces involved over the last couple of decades. And now they're going to have to leave because of the US as well. It wasn't necessarily their choice to pull out now, but the Brits won't be able to hold up on their own without that American support. And you go on down the line, and it's true of the other 35 countries as well. So I think that this bet is essentially that the US's long-term interests are better served by finding other ways to contain China in its naval pursuits in East Asia, in its economic pursuits and its economic bullying of some countries, rather than betting to really clamp down terrorism entirely. And that sounds like a great theory until the next big terrorist attack happens. And maybe it'll be the Afghani people that feel that first and foremost as they confront the Taliban, but we can't rule out the idea that there will be further attacks either on American soil or on the soil of other democratic allies. And then the equation is going to feel different if that happens.
All right, Ryan Heath, thank you.
Thank you.